Today, we're diving into something pretty cool. We're going to explore how robots and augmented reality, all that futuristic tech, could totally change how we protect and experience historic sites. And we're going to be using Laurel Hill Cemetery in Saco, Maine as our main example.
It's a really interesting idea. Laurel Hill, they started it way back in 1844. It's one of those beautiful Victorian-era garden cemeteries.
Jordan Cemetery.
Yeah, so back then they were moving away from those kind of cramped churchyards towards places that felt more like parks, designed for people to remember loved ones and just reflect.
So like a peaceful escape kind of thing. I can picture it walking through those grounds, feeling all the history and peace. And it sits on the Saco River, right? That's got to be even more historically significant.
Oh, absolutely. That river. Super important to how this whole region developed. For centuries, it was a main route for Native American tribes, and then later, a lifeline for the early settlers, especially in the lumber and textile industries.
Wow, so we've got this quiet, place of remembrance built right next to what used to be a bustling center of activity. That's really something.
Yeah, it is. It shows how much history's layered into a place like Laurel Hill, how the stories of the past are all woven together with the natural landscape. And speaking of the landscape, it being October and all.
New England in the fall.
Exactly. The cemetery will soon be bursting with all those amazing fall colors.
It's truly a sight to see.
You've got that natural spectacle set against those permanent, unchanging monuments. It really makes you think about life and death, change, and how some things stay the same.
It really does. But let's shift gears a bit. From the peaceful to the maybe, lightly spooky. We're also going to look at the potential of AR, augmented reality, at Laurel Hill.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Picture this. You put on a pair of those AR glasses.
Okay, I'm putting them on. What am I seeing?
And certainly the whole cemetery comes to life in a whole new way.
Okay, but what does that look like? Give me an example.
Well, imagine, let's say, family-friendly tours where, I don't know, cartoon versions of historical figures just pop up from behind the gravestones and start telling you their stories. Or, if you're feeling brave, maybe a spooky, even a little scary encounter with a virtual ghost.
Now that you mention it, I think the article mentioned something about using AR to create a Dracula experience. I can see it now. Tourists visiting for the fall foliage, adding a spooky cemetery tour to their trip, especially around Halloween.
Exactly. It'd be a unique seasonal event, something you can only experience here.
Yeah.
Draw in more visitors, generate some income to help maintain the cemetery.
Now that's a win-win. But let's move on to the robots. I'm really curious about these humanoid robots taking care of these historic grounds.
Right, so picture this. These robots, they'd have special cleaning tools, maybe even tiny lasers or microabrasion techniques to gently clean those centuries-old gravestones without causing any damage. Plus, they could handle all the landscaping, keeping everything pristine.
So more than just mowing and pruning, they're actually caring for these fragile pieces of history, like having a whole team of robotic preservationists on staff.
Exactly. It's like they'd be caretakers, not just maintenance workers. Imagine them with sensors all over, constantly checking the monuments, finding any little problem before it becomes a big deal.
So they'd be like, hey, this stone's looking a bit rough, or there's a crack forming over here, giving those historical treasures a high-tech checkup, huh? That's pretty neat. But it's also kind of, I don't know, robots taking care of things that represent, well, us not being around anymore. Makes you wonder how people feel about mixing technology and tradition in a place like that.
It's definitely something to think about. Some folks, they might see it as disrespectful, like we're invading a sacred space with all this tech. Others might be all for it, seeing these robots as, I don't know, guardians working 24/7 to preserve the memory of those who've passed on. It's complicated. No easy answers.
For sure. On the one hand, we've got robots potentially revolutionizing how we care for cemeteries, and on the other, there's all this history, tradition, reverence. Do you think all this could actually change how we experience cemeteries, fundamentally?
It could,
Yeah.
Cemeteries, especially these garden cemeteries like Laurel Hill, they've never been just about burial. They're about history, art, finding a quiet place to reflect. Imagine these robots making them even more beautiful, more peaceful, because they're so well kept.
Yeah, I can see that. And the article talked about how beautiful Laurel Hill is in the fall, all those colorful leaves. Imagine walking through this perfectly maintained space. And then, through your AR glasses, the stories of the people buried there come to life around you.
Exactly. It could make the whole experience so much deeper, more meaningful even. Might get people more interested in genealogy, local history.
Instead of just seeing names and dates on a stone, you're practically meeting these people, learning their stories, their families, what they did. It's amazing how tech can breathe new life into these old places, make them relevant for people today. We talked a lot about the robots themselves, but what about the AI running them? How do you teach a robot to, I don't know, care for a historic cemetery?
That's the really cool part. These wouldn't be robots just following pre-programmed instructions. They'd have to learn, adapt to their environment. Imagine them with advanced AI so they can recognize different plants, know what each one needs, and take care of them accordingly.
So it's not just about trimming everything into the same shape. They're making, like, smart decisions about these living, breathing landscapes.
Precisely. Analyzing soil,
Mm.
spotting diseases or pests, even changing their routines based on the weather, the season. It's about using AI to make sure these historically important landscapes thrive for years to come.
Wow. It sounds like these robots would have to be more than just machines, almost like robotic gardeners with a deep understanding of nature, history, how it all blends together in a place like Laurel Hill.
And don't forget, they could be storytellers too. Imagine a group of visitors, and the robot, using its AI, figures out what they'd be most interested in. Then, boom, it shares historical anecdotes, points out famous people buried there, even leads them on a custom tour.
That's incredible. It's like having a personal historian on demand. The possibilities really seem endless.
They really are. And as AI keeps getting smarter, who knows what these robots will be capable of? It's getting harder and harder to tell where technology ends and the human experience begins.
Okay, but let's come back down to earth for a second. We've talked about the good stuff, but what about the challenges? There's got to be some hurdles to bringing robots and AR into a place like Laurel Hill.
Oh, absolutely. Cost is a big one. These robots, the AR, it's all cutting edge, which means expensive. And a lot of these historic sites, they don't have a ton of money to throw around.
Right. And money aside, just getting it all to work smoothly is a challenge in itself. These robots would have to navigate some tricky spaces, not bump into visitors, deal with the weather, all while doing their jobs perfectly.
Absolutely. And it all has to blend in. We can't have these additions sticking out like a sore thumb. It's about preserving the historical feel of the place, too.
Finding that balance between the old and the new, I get it.
Mhm.
So, what else? What other challenges are we looking at?
Well, we got to consider how people will react. Like we were saying before, some folks might find robots in a cemetery just plain wrong.
Mm.
We need to talk to people, explain the benefits, make sure everyone's on board.
It's about starting that conversation, helping people understand that this technology isn't about replacing us or making these sacred spaces less meaningful. It's about making them even better, preserving our shared history so future generations can appreciate it too. It's like walking a tightrope, right? Bringing in all this cool new tech, but doing it in a way that respects these historical places, the traditions, the feelings people have about them. It's a tough balance, but when it works, it works.
Yeah, definitely. And we're not just talking about bricks and mortar here, are we? We're
Oh.
talking about preserving the heart of these places, the stories they tell, the memories they hold, making sure those things matter to people in the future, too.
And we've talked about how this could bring in more tourism, especially with those AR experiences. But money aside, what's the biggest win here? If we can make all this tech work for historical preservation, what's the real payoff?
For me, it's about access. Think about it. Anyone, anywhere, could experience a place like Laurel Hill. It wouldn't matter if you couldn't physically be there. Virtual tours, interactive exhibits. We could open these incredible places up to the whole world, get more people excited about the past, how it connects to us today.
It's like taking history and making it something everyone can be a part of. And the learning possibilities, too. Imagine students, instead of just reading about history, they could put on these AR glasses and bam, they're talking to historical figures. Or taking a virtual field trip to a cemetery, all from their classroom.
Exactly. It could totally change how we teach and learn about history. Less about memorizing dates and facts, more about actually experiencing the past. It could be huge for getting young people interested in history.
It's amazing to think we could change how we connect with the past, make it feel closer, more real. It's more than just keeping history safe. It's about bringing it back to life.
Exactly, and that's a really important point. Technology, if we use it right, it can change how we see and understand the past. It's a really exciting time to be exploring this intersection of history and innovation.
It really is. So we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring the potential of robots and AR in preserving our history. What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Don't forget the human element. That's the key. All this technology, it's not about replacing us. It's about giving us new tools, tools to understand, to appreciate, and ultimately to make sure these incredible places and the stories they hold continue to inspire us, teach us, for generations to come.
Well said. And who knows, maybe someday we'll all be wandering through places like Laurel Hill, enjoying the peace and quiet, our AR glasses showing us a whole hidden layer of history, and those robots working away in the background, making sure it all stays beautiful. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the future of historical preservation. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop imagining what's possible.